You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
I have recently been forced to conceptualize the notion of conspiracy in such monumental proportion it eclipses in its all-encompassing shadow all other mind-blowing, universe-altering revelation. And though I am far from resolving its deeply profound riddle as possibility, it has nevertheless shattered my foundational truth when it comes to astronomical observations made in deference to the motion, formulation, mechanics, structure, and construct of celestial entities in both planetary and star system. Having studied astronomy as my science in college, I believed myself to have better grasp of heavenly design than most, and yet my knowledge on the interactions of the earth with the other objects of our supposed solar and universal system is now diffused in such way that I am left in quandary that makes me unable to entertain other focus. Similar to the day after I awoke to the conspiracy of 9/11 and government-sponsored terror, I am now in need of model which will sufficiently replace in explanation my observation and imagination of how things daily unfold around me as world. Like my cats when I move them to new residence, having disrupted all they knew as house and living space since their entrance into world as kittens, I too am now exploring new boundary and limitation in hopes of bringing sense to the conundrum determining specificity of location when it comes to envisioning self in world. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed. I have as co-host with me this evening, Cathy Dunson. Cathy, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everybody.
Well, welcome, sister. Always a pleasure to fellowship with you, and thanks for always helping me to keep a pulse on what's going on in the world. I think I would be like really in a bubble without your constant updates and reflections on, what's important and just your ability to rake it all together. And it's amazing, and I appreciate your research, and I know that the listening audience does as well. And so with that, let's go ahead and get into some of the current events or news stories that you find beneficial and important to share with the world.
Well, I pulled some together, and they're just real recent, hot off the press. But before we did, I wanted to mention a particular video that came out that's supportive of your work in Lucifer, Father of Cain. There's a channel we follow. It's called Enter the Stars. His name is Casey. And his video is Twins from Different Fathers. Can you say superfecundation? Did I say that right?
Right, yeah. The heteropaternal superfecundation, yep.
Yes, and there's been some discussion. You've been on a show recently with Now You See TV, which was a really great interview. You touched a lot of hot topics there, talking about your book. And then with what Jonathan Kleck has come out with recently, his revelation having to do with having to do with the Vatican, and so much there that is built upon his work for years, and your work as well. And Dr. Joy, you all have researched this information deeply. I don't think anyone in the plane could come close. It's all sourced and researched, and I think very highly of it. I mean, it's really spoken to me. It's answered so many questions, and I recommend that interview you did, because it would answer a lot of questions for people. I just listened to it again yesterday, kind of with those issues, ticking them off one by one, that and how you were able to address them. But then I came home and I saw this from Casey, and it was great confirmation, great timing. I thought it would be something that would help some others to look at it with new eyes, that this is something a lot of people think is just biologically impossible, and so they're real dismissive out of the gate on it. I mean, you deal with this. Give me some of your thoughts there.
Oh, yeah, to me, it's just further confirming witness to the truth that, as you said, Jonathan, I, and Dr. Joy, and there's been many others as well. I think that we've been the ones that have been the most targeted when it comes to people harassing others about, embracing and accepting this as truth, only because we have done such diligent work and being persistent over the now numerous years. I believe Dr. Joy and I first began to discuss this issue and share it with others all the way back in like 2007, 2006, and Jonathan, of course, we have been confirming witness for each other's work, and all of our efforts have come about and been brought together from very different angles. Dr. Joy, she's one of those that studies from the King James mostly only, even though she does venture out into the realm of extra biblical and extra canonical texts. Her focus is predominantly on the canon as foundation for truth, and I, on the other hand, utilize the canon, of course, as foundational truth, but I study everything else as well. And Jonathan was just brought to this with, just his spiritual gift of unlocking the codes that that the New World Order elites present in putting together, even like with the story of the One World Trade Center and the Twin Towers previous, and now all of these things that he's tying together as far as the Locust Army and our being having fell into this world that we were once immortal, bright-natured beings, and that the whole collective fall of humanity has to do with incarnating in the flesh now, and that we are in a fallen form, in a fallen world, and that we pre-existed. And so his discernment is similar to mine in that regard, and he has been brought to understanding from a completely different perspective and point of view, whereas my study and my understanding and revelation on all of this was led by the study of all these scriptures, all these other books that most people ignore, never read, and probably never even had heard of. And so
right.
Just in reading and studying all that material, so much that is not embraced as mainstream truth kept presenting itself to me, and so the Most High led me in that regard to those revelations, which I have shared in my radio and work, and as well as in the many books that I've written. And so it's a blessing. It's a huge blessing to have individuals, even like yourself and the others, that share fellowship with us through the different radio programs in the chat room, in the commentary on our videos, the supportive, especially those that are supportive of, and that in sharing their own testimony are confirming witness to the revelations that all of us share, because we do get attacked at every turn of the way. It's unbelievable how much
only compared to the flat earth.
Right, yeah.
And you went right into that. I would think, especially with some of the things I've seen coming from people who have been investigating flat earth as well, there might be an opportunity to take pause and think, well, I'm kind of coming at this topic the way Globe Earth, the scientism group has been coming at those who are investigating flat Earth. Because I've seen it. It's exactly the same thing without realizing, stepping back and thinking, oh my gosh, these people have been studying this for years.
Right.
And they're confirming witnesses. And it's an area of topic that, these other people have not looked into.
Exactly.
And I think it's just a matter of, realizing, okay, either agree to disagree, but, like we would want others in the flat earth or in other areas where you don't know fully, to love one another as brothers and sisters in Christ.
Exactly.
That should be our first focus. And you actually, there's a quote of yours that I had written down long ago. It's very simple that, what is our goal in life? It's salvation through Christ and eternal life. And I don't even know if you even remember that you wrote that, but that was something that I wrote down in short. And that is my goal in life, salvation through Christ and eternal life. And I want to focus on the words of Jesus, which were about loving one another. In John 13:34, he said, a new commandment I give to you, that if you love one another just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. And I think that it applies in what we were just talking about. It applies. I see this happen a lot. People find fault in things coming from Hillsong. And I love their music. Mm-hmm. Their music, it glorifies God. You cannot deny that. Yeah. But to attack them, to me, the church down the street, the mega church I used to belong to and volunteer, and I was there every weekend. I did everything with them. They are as blind as Hillsong. Are these people going to go and start, talking about all of these other congregations? I don't think we need to talk about them. I think we need to love them. I think we need to realize they don't know. They have no idea what they're doing. And sometimes I've even wondered, are there infiltrations in the organizations that are in the production area that are putting out things that look like, pyramids or that, I've wondered that. And I see so much just across the board, Hillsong, Hellsong. There are horrible things said about that, and it just hurts my spirit. We should be praying for them, loving them, bringing people out if we can, changing within if we can, but we shouldn't be attacking. Or Kent Hovind, there's been a lot in the flat earth community, people that want to see him recognize that he's wrong. Well, hey, he's done so much for the truth and bringing evolution to its knees. I as a broad brush, I think we need to stop attacking one another.
I'm in agreement with that because, and we have to honor that. I always say this, we have to honor people for where they are. And we are all still learning, even, myself in coming to understanding on the flat earth, and even now my work on the dome and the firmament, these are new revelations to me. And some have, been in the know for 30 years or however long, which is amazing. I know for most of us, it's only been recent that this has even come up as an approachable topic or even something to begin to look into. But there are a lot of people that, there's books going back to the 1800s written on this topic. And so there have been people that have been in the know on these issues. And not everybody has open themselves to it or to even begin to study on it, and honor them where they are. Yes, if you want to, send them emails asking them to look into it, because that's what spurned me as well. But, be respectful. Don't just at every turn of the way tear down people just because I'm sure Brother Kent Hovind is very busy with all of his stuff and what all that he's been doing. And maybe, if we all pray, maybe at some point he will actually begin to look into it in a way that his eyes will be open to it as understanding, just like especially with this topic on Cain being a child of the devil. Most people that are against it or that have judgment levied upon it haven't really done their research in a way that they have when, like, if they've opened and looked into the flat earth and are now believers and know that the earth has no curvature and neither that it does not move in any way. Because in my opinion, when you really do the investigation, it's undeniable how much evidence there is that confirms indeed Cain is completely different in characteristic of likeness and similitude than that of Abel or Seth, and the all of the connections that we have made, and even now my work with Jonathan and with Dr. Joy and others, there's so much evidence that when you really do the investigation, in my opinion, it becomes undeniable. And so if people really will put forth the same kind of effort as they did when they began to investigate 9/11, and it came to the understanding that indeed there are aspects of the world, the conspiratorial side of what's going on in the world, the New World Order, these shadow elites, and all the other just insane things that we've all now accepted as truth, with the dragon-like entities, the Nakash, and how they're connected to the New World Order elites, the satanic ritual sacrifice and all of that. I mean, all of that is just mind-blowing stuff, but we've all come to know it as truth. And so I would hope that even with the topic of Cain, the topic of the flat earth, the topic of pre-existence, all the things that I teach, which sound just bizarre and beyond belief, that if you will open yourself to really investigating in a way that that you like, if you're trying to solve a crime, like a detective or investigator, these things, in my opinion, become undeniable, and they are revelations which, like the Most High did with me, that He will also share with you and give you the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and a mind to understand. And that when and if you can do that, these revelations are huge for unlocking so much of Scripture that remains veiled and hidden. And it helps us to also understand who our true enemies are, how they've been ruling from the shadows and have been working, behind the mask of Oz to perpetuate the New World Order as we see it everywhere around us. And so
I wanted to mention again the video, the interview that you did with Now You See TV. That's the YouTube channel, and it's titled Lucifer, Father of Cain, the Evil One's Seed. It was a really good interview, and you addressed a lot of the issues people have. There'll probably be comments too, back and forth, but I thought you did a wonderful job. And I really would hope that within the Christian community, especially the flat earth community, as we begin to grow, let's stop throwing stones at one another for anything. I mean, go to your brother or sister in private if you have an issue, but there's so much discord going on right now. I haven't been able to sleep the past few nights. It's very upsetting to me. Anyway.
yeah.
Don't like to see you attacked, or Jonathan. And Jonathan can be kind of abrasive. I mean, and he knows that, but he's gone through so much. I mean, he even started one of the videos in this series out apologizing. And I imagine a lot of people didn't catch that because they may have turned it off at one point. But for those of us who have followed him for years and seen the gift he has of revelation, and seen through this journey, I mean, Jonathan probably had no idea where this was going. I mean, what a wild ride we've all been on.
Yes, exactly. And I tell you, in sharing what the Most High, because it's absolutely my knowing that Jonathan and I are absolutely servants to the Most High God, and that we only share the truth that He wants us to share with world. And even though it is not um, not easily embraced, truth is truth, and God has led us to these things in order to help people to better understand the nature of the world and also the truth that is written into the scriptures. And neither of us chose to want to come to knowing on these issues. We just are servants to God in whatever capacity He wants us to bring forth His understandings and the things that He has declared within His Word. And that's all we're trying to do. And the fact that we get beat up at every turn of the way for simply doing that, it's sometimes it is absolutely overwhelming. I have since learned to just, like water off a duck's back, to just let it go, and to not to let myself get deeply affected by all of the people that daily try to comment on my videos, or that create their own videos against me. And, Jonathan and I are often mentioned in the same breath together, because we are confirming witness for one another in these things. And I give so much thanks and praise and honor to the Most High for allowing me to have a brother and a friend.
God bless you.
Like him, because sometimes it is too much, but the fact that we can support each other and empower one another is a beautiful thing. And I know that, he's been a support for me, and I have tried to return the favor to him, and that, sometimes the walk is difficult. And even yourself, Cathy, that you get attacked as well. And all those that have understood these things, that many things that we have been taught and that we share with you freely and share with the world freely, all of you are being attacked as well. Probably not as much as us, but most certainly you feel it and you see it and sense it. And it's amazing to me how much hatred comes forth from the Christian community, when all we're trying to do is to live in the example of Christ and to be good foot washers unto the world.
I think that there's still so much that will be revealed that we won't know in this life, and there's so much too from the past, from the church background that I come from, that many come from. You realize now that you didn't learn, you weren't told, things were hidden, and there's so much knowledge that we've come to. I think it's just best where you haven't done that research yourself. Either do it, spend the time and do it, or just, let it be. And, there's a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. And that principle is contempt prior to investigation, or what is it? Ignorance prior to condemnation prior
without investigation.
Yes. And Proverbs 18:13 also says, "He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him." So those are good words, and people need to think about that.
Yes, and I try to live by those things, because I have been attacked. And when I published my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, I had no idea that I was going to receive the kind of the repercussions that would be associated with the publication of that book. I had no idea that the world would respond to me and respond to it in the manner that they have. And I'm very grateful that when I was younger and involved in martial arts, that I was truly a warrior. I was, I would go to any dojo in any part of the country and go in and fight with their best. And so I knew that I could hold my own and take care of myself in whatever situation had come about. And so that all of that training initially before my acquiring my disability has prepared me for being able to hold my center in all of the, because we are in a whirlwind of attacks and people calling us this or,
And
defaming
from
us.
family and
Yeah,
friends.
yeah,
From
totally.
family too.
Right.
They want us just to, go back to church on
Right,
Sunday.
exactly, yeah.
Everything will be fine.
Right, exactly.
Stop reading all that alternative news stuff.
Exactly. Oh, goodness, we're at the first break. All right, we'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm really glad, Cathy, that you brought up and that we shared the story of that video of the heteropaternal superfecundation, because, again, that information helps to unlock so much of what is misunderstood in the world. And I think it's absolutely imperative that people study and come to the truth on these topics because, again, it helps us to understand who our enemies are and that we are not all the same and that there is a group here on the plane of the earth that do not worship the same God as we, nor do they accept Christ as Savior Messiah. And they are connected to and are working just as hard as we are working to bring forth truth to help people to understand the esoteric and biblical and prophetic side of what's going on in the world. They are on the other side of it working to keep people dumbed down, to keep them distracted. And there are a lot of disinformers that are paid by them to purposely comment on videos that we put out to attack us, to keep us down, to try to establish negative connotations with the work that both Jonathan and I and Dr. Joy and others that are sharing revelatory truth in this manner. They are paid disinformers, and they are the enemy to truth, and they are purposely trying to create and to set up this kind of antagonistic system and to create division within the brotherhood in order to keep us distracted and to keep people from even looking into all of these topics. I mean, I still hear it every day as to how the flat earth is a psyop, and people, that contact me in similar manner. And yet it's absolute truth. There is no curvature. The earth is not moving. And so, if it is a psyop, well, it's working against them, and in my opinion, it's actually doing detriment to the whole the heliocentric worldview and the Darwinian, and also the fallen angel aspect of it, which is now asserting that they are our gods. And so, Cathy.
Well, I think too, going back to your work and exposing the satanic evil, just the participation throughout history, the plan, God's entirety of His plan, which goes from Genesis to Revelation, and there is information that predates the time of Genesis. The things that you write about that you've been able to study in other works. I mean, the Bible is truth, but not all truth is in the Bible. I think people are quick to forget that. But I think understanding the supernatural and that he's been affecting history throughout history. And of course, that's been his plan. He wants to destroy men's souls.
Yes.
That's something that we have become lazy about as a people in the church, and people who are lost. They don't realize that there is a force, and it is a real being with other beings that serve him, either angelic, spiritual, or demonic, or human. And that is what is at play going on in our world today. That is what Ephesians 6:12, that, we are in spiritual warfare, and we don't realize, we are so inured to that and don't think about it in any way that it impacts us. It's like everything else, it doesn't affect my life. Right. Well, I wanted to jump through the news real quick, because what you're talking about, just yesterday, stories are coming out. I'm not sure what day this occurred, but for the opening of this rail line in Switzerland, they had this mega ritual, satanic Illuminati ritual that is beyond belief. And, the media will barely report it. And I heard that in some venues where they did report it, they were trying to make the idea of this goat leader. It was a Baphomet dressed man that was leading the ritual, on a screen that was a demonic looking image. And then a person dressed up as a goat with a goat head. They were trying to say, oh, well, in the Swiss Alps, they have goats.
Right.
That's why he was there. But this entire ritual, it's so amazing what they were doing. In the Daily Mail, they have an article, and it says, a winged baby, semi-naked dancers, and a man with a bird's nest on his head, how Switzerland decided to mark opening of world's longest rail tunnel. The baby, well, let me read a little bit from a Vigilant Citizen. They have a great article about this. Just a couple of the women dressed in white hold small horns on their heads as if saying, we accept the goat man as our God. And then it went on, all the while the goat man runs around getting increasingly energized. The second part of the ceremony, they went outside. Well, the very beginning, let me tell you that. It's kind of hard to know where to start with this thing. The very beginning, they had a scene with workers walking in cadence to this music, real determined, walking in these orange works. And they say this depicts the workers over the years who worked on this tunnel. But none of this looks like that at all if you're the least bit aware. And I think everyone else was uncomfortable. There was all these dignitaries. Angela Merkel was there, the president of Italy. Another one I don't remember offhand, but it showed the workers being sent into the tunnel. And they said there's something very new world order to this militaristic portrayal of the working force. As the drums get more rhythmic, the workers get more excited, dancing around and jumping through the loops. Then things get stranger. A train brings a group of young people dressed in white underwear. And then they start, for some reason, the ceremony becomes strangely sexual as the white-clad people start groping each other. This is the way Switzerland marks the opening of a miracle, of a big feat in building this rail system. I'd like to know about the curvature of the earth, by the way.
Yeah, right.
And then it goes on. After portraying the workers as zombie soldiers, the ceremony portrays the general population as a bunch of lascivious people who appear to be extremely suggestible. All of this is very obvious. There's a 25-minute video of it, which is in my show notes, by the way. Then emerging from that train is a demonic fallen angel, a baby-faced Lucifer, which is naked. The scene that is meant to honor the workers who died during the construction of the tunnel. Why is baby Lucifer creepily flying above them? So this is the most bizarre since I Pet Goat 2. I mean, they go on outdoors now, and they have something that they're hanging workmen by chains in the air. It says the ceremony portrays the death of workers in a disturbing manner. I think so. And then they are replaced by ghosts. They say ghosts, and for some reason, I thought they looked like, because they showed like a huge asteroid on this big screen. I don't know if you've seen it. You probably haven't been able to yet. But then they showed these three ghost-like apparitions, and it just brought to mind for me, given, where we are and things, and with Jonathan and all the Catholic stuff I've been looking at lately, I thought of the three children with Fatima. But it starts to expand out, and it looks like a portal on the screen that they're showing. And all these people in the white underwear are rolling around on the ground. And the goat person is, that's right, there's another picture. They have all these eyes circling around. Nothing strange about that, right?
Right.
And then at the end, the Baphomet character is draped by a woman in white as if saying, "You are now the king of the world." So that's what's going on in Switzerland.
Well, the thing about all of these bizarre rituals now, because we see that in every instance, all these different award shows, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, they don't care anymore. It's like maybe previous, maybe a few decades back, they would try to interweave it into, whether it's opening ceremonies or what. It would be a lot more subtle and a lot less in your face. But now we're so far advanced into the end of days that they just do not care. They will, all in your face, and like they're flashing their Illuminati gang signs, and they have no concern with who sees it or what the public thinks. It's just a matter of time before they are openly doing like cremation of care ceremony, where they're mock ritual sacrifice, victim and blood sacrifice, right. And then then after that, these massive fertility festivals where they have these mass orgies, even with kids involved. I mean, it's crazy how the bounds that they are pushing, but it just lets you know as to how we are at the end of days, and that things are progressing so very quickly, which leads us into some of the other stories, like the one that shows all the different charts showing the decline,
financial,
yeah. And these are things that are also in connection to these rituals, because that also the depression and which is financial suicide for the world. All of that is a great sacrifice. It's going to force a lot of people to suffer in ways that will cause some to even lose their lives. And those things are also with the Ponzi scheme, and with money being just created out of nothingness, the decline of the economic system, the collapse of the financial markets, all of that is orchestrated. And so those things are done. Yeah, go ahead,
and
Cathy.
they worship Lucifer. I
Exactly.
mean, Rothschild, these people who are the money masters, they worship Lucifer, and they believe that he is the one that was wronged, and that he is the one that is going to somehow win. Right. And so they pledge their allegiance to him in so many different ways. I was just because of everything that Jonathan had been bringing out directly to do with the Vatican, I went back to the book Windswept House from Father Martin, Malachi Martin, who many think was actually murdered. And in that, he chronicles the enthronement of Satan in the Vatican in 1962. And it was a dual ceremony. It's fascinating, and it's pure evil. It was a dual ceremony in Rome and in America, in South Carolina. So there's all of this that goes on that people don't understand. They won't accept. I mean, like so much that even that you've revealed. Even Jim Willey, the money guy, he was on a show with John B. Wells, and he was talking about being in, it was some bank, I'm not sure where it was, and he heard some ceremony, ritualistic ceremony going on, and he thought he knew what it was, that it was one of these. I mean, Eyes Wide Shut, the movie.
Right.
And so these are the people that are behind the demise that is coming. And if people don't think the collapse is coming, they're blinded.
Right.
These charts, they all show what's going on. This is at Zero Hedge, and it's titled, these are the 9 Zero Hedge charts showing Obama's recovery, which he was touting again this week, that angered the Washington Post. And the Washington Post, I mean, they were angry by these charts, and these charts were all from the Fed information. And that they themselves are owned by Jeff Bezos. So, he's one of the very wealthiest men in the world now. And I have another article that I go back to a lot, and it states the media is owned by 6 corporations, 90%. And this was a few years ago. I'm sure it's more now. 90% of the media that people take in is owned by 6 corporations. And gee, we wonder who owns them.
Right. Right.
So another article that was from today, the headline is, this financial bubble is 8 times larger than the 2008 subprime crisis. All of the indicators right now are worse than in 2007, right before the collapse. So just looking at those indicators, 102, this was the jobs report that came out yesterday, worst in nearly 6 years. 102 million working age Americans do not have jobs.
Yeah, it is absolutely sad. And what is coming is unprecedented, because they have been preparing for a kind of disaster that has not yet been replicated. All of the other things, even though, it's called the Great Depression, going back to the 30s, and we saw major declines in 2008 and back in 1993 and other places, the event that is coming is, there's no equal. They've been planning for it in such a way that it's going to collapse the entire financial system. And with our $21 trillion in debt, there's no coming out of this cleanly. Everybody will be affected deeply and profoundly. And the way that we live right now will be no more.
Absolutely. Even last week, Barack Obama came out and he warned Americans to be prepared for a disaster. So that was very unique to have him come out and say, he said, I don't have what he said. One of the things that we have learned over the course of the last, this is from his speech. One of the things that we have learned over the course of the last 7.5 years is that government plays a vital role, but it is every citizen's responsibility to be prepared for disaster. And that means taking proactive steps like having an evacuation plan, having a fully stocked disaster supply kit. If your local authorities ask you to evacuate, you have to do it. Don't wait. And it says this speech was timed to coincide with the beginning of the hurricane season. Although hurricanes have not posed a threat lately, in fact, a major hurricane has not made landfall in the United States for 127 straight months. So that's very odd for him to come out with that kind of a comment.
And those kind of things are done,
on purpose.
Yeah, exactly, to signify, hey, the time is here.
And they have some kind of spiritual law, don't they? That they have to.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. There's a name to that. I forget.
Right, I forget too, but it's where they basically declare what they are going to do.
Lesser magic.
Yeah, and then that relieves them of any judgment or consequences for their actions.
God's a God of order. I mean, He has rules and regulations for them as well. So it's something along that line. There was one other story I wanted to read or mention real quick. And this is just a part of it as well. The implosion with the borders being wide open. There's a report out from Judicial Watch, and they're really reliable. Van loads of illegals are being driven into the U.S. by the Department of Homeland Security, and there's no paperwork and no oversight for them. And this was a first since the Iraq War, that the United States launched airstrikes from the Mediterranean. This was yesterday.
Huh. Well, I know, like with the them bringing in all of these illegals, that there are certain facets that we don't understand. Like even with the 9/11 supposed terrorists, how they were allowed to enter into the country, how they were protected. They were given passports and they were allowed to go about as if they were training for basically stealing those passenger airliners, even though we know that they couldn't have done that, and especially without the knowledge of the government. But that the terrorists are often assisted at every turn of the way by the government in order to be able to succeed.
Like ISIS.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Even with like the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Centers, that individual was hired by the FBI and he didn't even think that the bomb was active, that it was just a drill, but he was being snow jobbed, and that he was being made the patsy, and the truth came out because he actually recorded his meetings with his handlers, and so it came out that he was an FBI informant, and so the tables got turned, and the government had to was forced to expose their part and their portion in all of that whole scenario. And so it always works like that. We find often that the terrorists which are connected to, even like with Timothy McVeigh, even though that truck bomb wasn't responsible for the blowing up of the Oklahoma City bombing, that the bombs were actually on the inside, but he was made a patsy. He was trained to be one of these terrorists in order that the blame could be levied on him and the finger pointed in his direction. And so these kind of things are always done, but there's always a darker and a more shadowy element where the government actually funds, professional assassins and killers and terrorists to perpetuate these false flag events.
To go on to one other thing, because I know we're running out of time here, there have been, of course, the weather continues to, apocalyptic is probably the word. There's a channel called The Two Preachers, and they've put out 2 videos in the last couple of days. The first one is from April, and just a couple of notes from watching that. 80% of the homes in Wiley, Texas in the month of April were hail damaged in this one storm they have. And I've seen this previously because it was a couple of months ago, but there were 80% of the homes in that city damaged. I mean, many vehicles destroyed. My son's car, I think it was probably that same story. He had his car totaled.
Wow.
He lives in Dallas. He's in Plano. And he's in Ethiopia right now on a mission trip, so people pray for him. Also, Houston was flooded in April. There was flooding in Pakistan. Just a couple of things I mentioned. Ecuador, there was a 7.8 earthquake then. droughts and famine and massive animal die-offs that they've chronicled in this video, and also erratic bee behavior. And I've seen other stories of this, and it may be the Africanized bees that are moving up through California, and tornadoes and fireballs, and we've had a lot of that. And they came out with a part 7 just today. So those were the main things I had to share today. Those are just things I pulled together. There were 9 soldiers that died in Fort Hood, Texas, due to the flooding, and that was really sad. That happened just the last couple of days. Yeah.
Yeah, again, all of these stories just tied together that, in my opinion, they confirm that we are living in the last days and that we are the fig tree generation. And as I have shared in my many books talking about that, ever since the establishment of Israel again as a nation, whether you think that was a Rothschild manufactured event or not, it still was allowed to go forth, and it still fulfilled prophecy according to the blooming of the fig tree as laid out by Yeshua in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. And so it is my belief that we are the fig tree generation and that we will see the unfolding of all things, that the prophecy will be completely fulfilled as it is written.
If anyone wants these article links and video links, please email me at Perelandra, that's P as in Paul, ERELANDRA 77 at gmail.com. There were also 2 videos I included that were by Casey, the channel Enter the Stars, where he decoded that satanic mega ritual.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sister. We'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everybody, for second hour. In this portion of the show, I'm going to share with you, update, and also share with you the chapter headings for the 27 chapters that are the different portions of what is going to be my latest book, which will be my 10th one. I'm believing the name will be The Firmament, the Vaulted Dome of the Earth. And if I think of anything better or different, then I may change the title. But as of right now, that's what I'm going to go with. But anyways, in looking into and trying to study, other books that have been written about this topic, there's only one that I have seen which is written, and it comes from a heliocentric perspective. And so, I've only been able to study this topic from the scriptures, which is what I wanted to do anyways. But I thought it was interesting that there are not a lot of books that have been written on the firmament or the vaulted dome of the earth. And so I'm excited to release this to for especially for those of you that have been looking into and wanting to follow up on the flat earth as topic, and that this will serve as a companion book for my 9th one, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. Because rather than reinvent the wheel or to rehash all of the material which others have as content within their own books for reasons why they believe that the earth is a flat plane or a horizontal plane. Of course, the mountains and the different topography which makes up the earth which breaks up it being just a flat, level, straight, horizontal plane. And so it's not really, in essence, completely flat, but most certainly the oceans create a level, what we reference as sea level, that most of the water of the world is, this sea level is what determines, the area above that is where the earth is divided. As it says in the third day in the order of creation, that the dry land was made to appear, and that the Most High had basically elevated the land from the waters of the below, which is the earth was inscribed as circle upon the waters of the below, as it says in Proverbs chapter 8. And so I'm going to share with you the names of the chapters that are part of this book. And it is almost already 400 pages, and I'm still going through the proofread. And so probably I will add some material. I'm trying not to add much because, when you have books that get to be over 300 pages, people become intimidated, and I don't want that to be a problem in any way. But I do want to provide all of the source reference all together in one place so that those of you that are interested in this as topic, you can find it all unified in one disclosure, and you won't have to go outside to seek out all the things which I believe are necessary to include in order to give you the understanding that I have been sharing or been led to as revelation, because this topic is deeper than just the firmament being a solid vaulted dome, which was put into place on above the earth on the second day. And it's my opinion that the timing and its association with the second day is also very intriguing. But I guess the way that I will approach going into the book is by answering a question that somebody had recently posed to me. Also, I must state this. For those of you that are commenting on my videos on YouTube, which I have over 700 videos available on YouTube, I am not in any way able to answer all of that commentary. I did attempt to do so for many years, but I really had to just kind of abandon that effort because it's to the point now where if I tried to maintain and to keep up with all of that commentary, that's all I would be doing, and I would have no time to do anything otherwise. And when I'm working on a book, I focus narrowly on completing it anyways. And so right now and for the last few months, I have not been answering. I do answer a few, but for the most part, I'm not keeping up with everybody's, with all the commentary that you are putting on the videos. And so know that, that I'm not trying to ignore you in any way or manner, but in order for me to accomplish the things that I'm working on, I need to be able to focus completely 100% on the task at hand in order so that I can get this information to you and to release it to you. And so I appreciate your patience and your tolerance, and those of you that do share really beautiful commentary with me on the videos. I appreciate all of you. For all the trolls, I have no problem anymore with banning you because I just do not have time to be gentle. There was a time when I tried to share discourse with you and to try to open your eyes, but I've since realized that some of you are part of the forces which are being paid to basically trash individuals like myself and Jonathan. And I just have no problems with banning individuals like that anymore. and I'm not going to tolerate, and I'm not going to just allow you to lead astray those that are trying to find truth, in coming to and sharing fellowship with those of us that are working in similar capacity to share the revelations the Most High is leading us to. And so, anyways, one of the questions an individual asked me was why I still contend and believe, now that I've been led to the revelation that the earth is not a heliocentric, that the earth is not a ball and that we are not spinning around the sun, why I still embrace that a pre-Adamic age and a prior time. And so I opened this whole book with a discussion on that topic. And the first chapter of this new book is entitled The Earth as a Ruinous Heap. And when I laid down in this first chapter, in the first couple, because the second chapter is entitled The War in Heaven and the Antediluvian Age, I share with individuals in going back over the first 4 days of creation as laid out in Genesis, how in between Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, there's a reference to the earth as being without form and void. And that when you look up the words for that particular without form and void, the word is tohu and the second one is bohu. And that when you look in the Strong's, it describes the earth as it seems to infer that the earth was destroyed and that it became a waste and that it became a ruinous heap. And so I revisit how it was that the earth did become a ruinous heap. And I describe in Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 onward how the earth was restored, recreated, and reformed as in the enclosed world system that we see in our living within right now. And that something occurred which led to the earth becoming, it says, an empty, desolate, wasteful, and destroyed place. And so I shared not only the different biblical narratives which talk about this, but also the commentary. And then I do an in-depth word study on, and then I lay out how the war in heaven is united and connected to this theme. Because in the second book of Enoch, it talks about that Lucifer and the rebel angels being cast out on the second day. And again, I said that the timing of the creation of the firmament is relevant to the war in heaven, because as I lay out in these first two chapters, it's my belief that this war in heaven and the rebellion, the insurrection of the fallen angels, is what led to the earth becoming desolate, destroyed, a ruinous heap. And that what we see unfolding in the rest of Genesis chapter 1 is its recreation. And that the firmament as a solid canopy, as a vaulted dome, which was fitted to the circle of the earth, once it is inscribed as circle on the waters of the below, that the reason the firmament had to have been put into place was in order to contain and to prevent the departure, the escape of the rebel angels from the earth as their prison. And so it's my belief that this is why the firmament was put into place, and that the previous earth age, and maybe even that of the previous earth, that a firmament was maybe not even necessary. I don't know. We do know that the firmament also divides the waters above from the waters below, and that there is commentary which says that if the firmament was not put into place, that the earth would have been drowned as it was during the flood of Noah's day. And so, which is also my belief that that this is the reason why the sky is blue is because of the waters above. And so, um, in these first two chapters, I describe and share with you why it is I still firmly believe in a prior time, in a pre-Adamic age. And I also share, which if you look up the words tohu wahobohu, which is, without form and void in the English translation in the King James, it's used another time in Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 23, 23 through 28, I believe it is. And that passage, in my opinion, is also a reflection of a previous age. And it talks about how there was not yet man, meaning that this was previous to the creation of modern humanity, with Adam and Eve. And that even in Genesis chapter 2, there's a reflection to a time when there was not yet rain and there was not yet a man to till the ground. And that those verses, in my opinion, are a reflection to a previous age. And that also in Ezekiel chapter 26, it talks about the destruction of the city of Tyre, and also the mainland, both the mainland and the island city, the new city of Tyre. And it links it to a destruction that had occurred to a previous seafaring people. And that much like Atlantis, there was this other city was destroyed and judged and drowned beneath the waves of the ocean. And how it is that you can only explain by understanding that there was a prior time in a previous age, how it is that there are cities, entire megalithic complexes at the bottoms of the ocean, and that they had to have been built and and created by the rebel angels in a time previous to the water levels and the oceans being where they are now. And so again, those things absolutely confirm to me that there was a previous age. And so that's why I open and begin, because another thing that I do in the very early chapters is I share with readers the creative process, not only Genesis's order of creation as stated in chapter 1 and chapter 2, but also from other texts, many other texts that also have in their scriptural testimony accounts of that parallel the Genesis account of the order of creation. And so I share those as well. I don't cover all 7 days. I'm only focused on the first 4. But in the first 4 days of the creative process of the creation week, you have on the first day the earth, being without form and void, and that it was then reformed, reestablished, and recreated. That on day 2, the firmament was put into place above it, and that the firmament, according to the Strong's Concordance and study of firmament as a word, as well as raka, which is a verb describing the creative process which led to the rakia, which is the word for firmament, translated as firmament in Genesis, but that in description of that creative process, the firmament is cited as being a solid structure which was beaten, hammered out, and spread abroad across the circle of the earth, as it says in Isaiah 40, that the heavens as a curtain was spread out above the circle of the earth, and that's what occurred on the second day. Then on the third day, once the enclosed world system is put into place and you have this firmament encapsulating and spread abroad across the breadth and the width and the of the circle that is the foundation of the earth, then the waters of the below the earth is lifted up above that sea level, and the mountains and the topography that becomes the continental land masses are created and put into place. And then the waters, which are also lifted up with the land masses, are then have to reaffirm their levels, and that's when we have the oceans, the lakes, the seas, the boundaries of the deep, all of that being put into place, and that the ends of the earth, which in my opinion is the Antarctic ice wall, and also where the firmament meets the earth, that this is what is referenced as the ends of the earth, and that and then on the fourth day you have the heavenly luminaries, the celestial luminaries, the moon, the sun, the stars, the so-called planets, which are nothing but wandering stars, as referenced in the book of Enoch, that all of these heavenly luminaries are put into the firmament in order to serve as a giant timepiece for the management, for the keeping track of passing time. And that the sun, its 24-hour rotation above the circle of the earth, above the face of the earth, that it becomes the measure of its 24-hour circuit becomes the basis for the measurements of the day, and that the moon, its quarterly phases become the measure for the week, and that its entire cycle becomes the measure of the month, and that the movements of the sun and the moon over the breadth of a year, that's how we have the measure of the years. And that there's also an even greater cycle that's put into place with that of the zodiac, and that the zodiac moves 1 degree, even though the sun moves through the 12 houses of the zodiac over the course of a year. The sun does not come back to the same place. The zodiac also shifts, and it will go through one of the houses of the zodiac, the 12 houses of the zodiac, every 2,160 years. And that there's a grand cycle of almost 26,000 years. I think it's like 25,982 years, which comprise one movement of the sun as it regresses through the different houses of the zodiac, and that it is also part of a grander scheme of managing and keeping time. And that in the modern age, we have moved through 3 houses, that of Taurus, Pisces, and have entered into the Aquarian age. And so, this grand cycle is also reflected in the heavens as a giant timepiece. And so I talk about all of those things as well. And then let me go ahead and share with you the rest of these chapters, and then I'll comment as we're going through. But I think that those of you that are interested in the topic of the firmament, that most certainly you will not find another book, another text which has the amount of information entered within it as this one does. Because again, with my being one of those that does study in depth all of the different extra biblical and extra canonical texts, that I don't know of any other person that would have been able to bring together in scope the massive accumulation of scriptural evidence which I have procured from all of these materials and put them together in one place in the way that I have done. Which again, for those that are interested in this topic, wouldn't you want to study it from every angle and perspective? I mean, you have many people talking about the canonical evidence, which is tied to and associated to not only the flat earth, but also with the dome and the firmament. But there's not many that are capable or have studied all of the material that I have, which would even be able to bring or compile the same, the massive quantities, the huge assortment of scriptural references from all different manner of places. And I grabbed everything that I could that I found in connection to the study of this topic and put it all together in one place for you. And so in chapter 3, we have the first 4 days of creation, a recount of the first 4 days. And in that description of the creative process, I shared not only the book of Genesis, but the Targums, the book of Jasher, the book of the Secrets of Enoch, the book of the Bee, the Chronicles of Jeremiel. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. I was talking about, before we went to break, just about how I cover the first 4 days of creation and the Genesis account of the creative process from many parallel texts, and that when in doing so, it gives great elaboration on all aspects of what occurred during those 4 days of the creative process. And so in chapter 3, I share all of those parallel accounts together. And then in chapter 4, I take out specifics which I want to emphasize and highlight and share commentary on, and I post them and unite them all together in that particular chapter. And then in highlighting certain aspects of what is described in that process, I then share with the reader and those of you that will be reading this text and that are studying this material, the importance of some of the things which are contained within the account of that creative process, so that we can gain insight into not only how the earth was reformed and regathered and reconstructed, but also to understand in a more profound manner the characteristics, the nature, the structure, the form, and the shape of the firmament as a heavenly canopy, as the vaulted dome of the earth. And then in chapter 5, I share other canonical references to these first 4 days of creation. And then in chapter 7, I go into and describe the firmament of heaven. And of course, I utilize the Strong's Concordance to gain a deeper insight into the different terms, the words which were selected to give an account of not only the firmament but other passages which I look into in the following chapters, like in chapter 8. That chapter is on the molten looking glass, which is a verse from Job chapter 26. And we look into that in order to gain more insight into the structure and the nature of the firmament. And then in chapter 9, I look into Amos chapter 9, verse 6, the NASB version of that particular passage, because in the King James Version, the word troop, the word for the firmament in the King James is translated as troop, which one of the other definitions, instead of troop being, the term troop, the word is aguda, and it can also mean the firmament or the vaulted dome of the earth. And so I share that with individuals as well. We elaborate on that and tie that together with the structure of the firmament as well. And then in chapter 10, I share a short article that Cathy had shared with me called The Invisible Plasma Shield. And it's interesting from a scientific perspective in reflecting also on the nature of the firmament. In chapter 11, I share something that I had elaborated upon in my previous book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, and that is the proper context of Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. And then from that point onwards, I go into the nature of the upper heavens. Chapter 12 is entitled The High Heaven. Chapter 13, The 10 Heavens. Chapter 14, The Most High Walks Upon the Vault of the Heaven. Chapter 15, The 3 Heavens, and how they are broken up with the earth being the foundational plane. Then you have the first 2 heavens creating the atmosphere and also what we reference as outer space. And then the 3rd heaven is called the highest heaven. And that's where the heavenly temple, the throne room of God, is, and how it sits upon the top of the firmament. And so in chapter 16, I go into the reference of the sea of glass, which is referenced in many passages, specifically in Ezekiel and in Revelation and John's vision. But the sea of glass as the top of the firmament, and I describe its connections to the throne room of God. In chapter 17, the kingdom of God. In chapter 18, God and the cherubim, because there's so many links to the throne room and the temple, the heavenly kingdom, and its connections to the cherubim. And also to the seraphim and the ophanim, but there's a lot of references to the throne room of God in connection to the cherubim. Chapter 19 is where I get into the discussion of paradise and how it has connection to also to the North Pole as center of the flat earth plane. and also the difference between paradise and the Garden of Eden. Very important topic. And so in chapter 19, I speak about paradise as our first estate. Chapter 20, I elaborate on the differentiation between paradise and the Garden of Eden, which is something that I talked about in my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, but is extremely relevant to what I'm talking about in this book. And so I introduced that as topic once more in order to help people to understand that paradise as our first estate is the place where Adam and Eve were created, and then when they lost their immortal bright natures, that this is from where they were cast out. And then the cherubim, the flaming sword cherubim, was put into place in order to prevent their return. And they were cast down to the earth, and they began to live in what is referenced as the Garden of Eden, and that they took up residence in the Cave of Treasures near the Garden of Eden. And so it's important to understand how this story ties together with the collective fall of humanity, which is something that Jonathan just did a 4-part series of videos on how we are the fallen, which I do recommend people check that out as well. And also know that Jonathan will be joining us again soon, probably a couple weeks, and we'll be elaborating on these things as well. Chapter 21 is entitled, Are These Sides of the North a Doorway, Portal, or Passageway to Heaven? And I explain how the north, what is described in Scripture as the north, in Isaiah 14, Lucifer talks about how the north is connected to not only the mount of the congregation, but also to the throne of the Most High God. And so in that chapter, I elaborate on how all of these things are tied together. And then in chapter 22, I link the sides of the north with the hollow of the earth as described as Sheol, or the great abyss, which basically paradise and Sheol are two opposite ends of the spectrum. Paradise being in the third heaven and the place from where Adam and Eve had fallen from, and the Garden of Eden being on the plane of the earth, but the place of the wickedness and of condemnation, Sheol, Tartarus, the great abyss, these are in the interior of the earth. And so I help people to understand how these things connect to these sides of the north. Chapter 23, I share an article entitled Russian Scientist Finds Paradise at the North Pole. And it ties together with some of the things that I'm referencing. And also a book by William Warren, I believe is his name. He wrote a book in 1882 called Paradise as the Cradle of Humanity. And he elaborates on the things that I am also sharing and talking about in this particular book. And then in chapter 24, I go into the eyewitness accounts of these northern polar regions, and I share two particular testimonies, one by Gerard Mercator in a 1577 letter to John Dee, a description of the North and the North Pole and the surrounding area. And I also share eyewitness account of the same thing, of the North Polar regions, from the Invencio Fortunata, which is also a 14th century book. And then in chapter 25, I cover the flat earth and vaulted dome Bible codes which I have discovered, which also authenticate the veracity of this material as truth. And that I also discuss how you can, utilize the same web portal to seek out your own Bible codes and explain how it can be done. And then in chapter 26, the title of the chapter is The Tabernacle of the Sun. And in that chapter, I explain how it's described. Okay, I think I'm back on now. I apologize, everybody. I was disconnected from the server for whatever reason, and so there's going to be a few minutes of lag. But let me go ahead and give you the rest of these chapters before the end of the show. All right, let me pull that up. I apologize. I think the internet hiccuped here, and so I was cast out for a short bit. All right, I'm all down to the last two chapters anyway, so I'll detail this really quick. I'm not sure if you were able to hear. I'll probably just go back two chapters just to make sure that you were able to hear me when I was describing the details on those particular chapters. But anyways, in chapter 23, I share with the readers an article called Russian Scientist Finds Paradise at the North Pole. And then in chapter 24, I share descriptions of eyewitness accounts of different. Thank you, Cathy. I appreciate that, sister. But eyewitness accounts of different voyagers that were successful in going to the North Pole and made it safely back to share their testimony with the King Edward III of England and also the King of Norway. And those two, one of the eyewitnesses' account is from a 1577 letter of Gerard Mercator to John Dee. And then the other is a 14th century book called the Inventio Fortunata. And so it's absolutely mind-blowing how paradise ties together with the vaulted dome, the firmament, and all those things which I'm describing here. It's an amazing revelation. And so I hope you are looking forward to checking out the book, because it's been a labor of love. Chapter 25 is the Flat Earth and Vaulted Dome Bible codes, because ever since one of my listeners sent me a link to this particular web portal, I have used it as resource to confirm some of the esoteric aspects of the things that I'm sharing in Revelation. And so I share some matrices that I discovered from which confirm the material that I'm presenting as resource in this book. In chapter 26, the chapter is entitled The Tabernacle of the Sun, and I describe in it, and I share many other passages which are really newly discovered, which talk about the circular revolution of the heavenly circuits of the sun, the moon, the stars, above the earth. And so I share all those passages and helping you to understand what I wrote in great detail in my previous book about, because in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which is that portion of the book of Enoch which I decrypted in my previous book, it describes the motions of the sun and the moon in that particular text, and I share all of that with you in this particular chapter. And then chapter 27 is called Concluding Requiem, and it's basically a summary of the material, not all of it, but a summary of why I believe this topic is important, and also how it really is connected to salvation, which for a lot of people, that is the focus of their work on behalf of the kingdom, is, they consider the salvation of souls to be the most important aspect of their work. And this topic and that of the flat earth, in my opinion, absolutely has everything to do with the salvation of souls. Because look at how many people, in buying into the heliocentric worldview, have been deceived and led astray into believing that God doesn't exist, or that we evolved to monkeys, or that science is correct in their assertions that, the earth, there's many different earths, and that there are many different solar systems and planetary systems, and that any number of them could have evolved life, and that having evolved life, that depending on when that evolution came about, they could be far in advance of us in wisdom and spiritual insight and technology, and that the ancient aliens are from some far off region, and that they could even be more evolved humans, or humans from the future. I mean, there's so much insanity that is associated and tied into the Darwinian heliocentric worldview, which makes believing in them easy when people embrace the whole Darwinian heliocentric worldview together as one. And that really, this is the basis for the oncoming deception, the strong delusion and its connections to the ancient aliens as being our creators. And so I discuss all of that in this chapter, the final chapter, and share with you, in summary, why this information is absolutely vital. Because the flat earth as revelation, along with the dome, the canopy, the heavenly canopy, the firmament, and our being living in an enclosed world system, it totally destroys the assertions of science and scientism and the deceptions which are connected to agencies like NASA and JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and other international space agencies which are doing nothing more than upholding these lies and these deceptions as truth. And that when you come to understand that that really there's, according to the biblical narrative, there's no way that anything, well, first, that we ever went to the moon, and that there are other planets out there like the Earth. The truth is we are the focus. We are the center of the universe. We are the only show going and the only game in town. And that the Earth is, as place of habitation for humanity, that we were indeed created in the image of our Maker. And that our Father, the Father and the Son, they sit atop the firmament, the vaulted dome of the earth, and they look down from that very strategic vantage point in watching over all of the processions, the proceedings that are occurring here on the earth, and that they are leading, guiding, and directing us to a certain prophetic end. And that, most important, the Son is coming again in order to judge the sins of the world and to divide, to separate the harvest that is the children of the devil, the tares, the goat, from the wheat, the sheep, the sons of Adam, the children of righteousness, the children of promise. And I pray that all of us are numbered and counted worthy to be grouped together with the elect, because those that are will inherit paradise, and that New Jerusalem will descend here to the earth, and the kingdoms of the earth will become the kingdoms of our Lord. God bless all. Good night.
Because it would answer a lot of questions for people. I just listened to it again yesterday, kind of with those issues, ticking them off one by one, that and how you were able to address them. But then I came home and I saw this from Casey, and it was great confirmation, great timing. I thought it would be something that would help some others to look at it with new eyes, that this is something a lot of people think is just biologically impossible, and so they're real dismissive out of the gate on it. I mean, you deal with this. Give me some of your thoughts there.
Oh, yeah, to me, it's just further confirming witness to the truth that, as you said, Jonathan, I, and Dr. Joy, and there's been many others as well. I think that we've been the ones that have been the most targeted when it comes to people harassing others about, embracing and accepting this as truth, only because we have done such diligent work and being persistent over the, now numerous years. I believe Dr. Joy and I first began to discuss this issue and share it with others all the way back in like 2007, 2006. And Jonathan, of course, we have been confirming witness for each other's work, and all of our efforts have, come about and been brought together from very different angles. Dr. Joy, she's one of those that studies from the King James mostly only, even though she does venture out into the realm of extra biblical and extra canonical texts. Her focus is predominantly on the canon as foundation for truth, and I, on the other hand, utilize the canon, of course, as foundational truth, but I study everything else as well. And Jonathan was just brought to this with, just his spiritual gift of unlocking the codes that that the New World Order elites present in.
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
I have recently been forced to conceptualize the notion of conspiracy in such monumental proportion it eclipses in its all-encompassing shadow all other mind-blowing, universe-altering revelation. And though I am far from resolving its deeply profound riddle as possibility, it has nevertheless shattered my foundational truth when it comes to astronomical observations made in deference to the motion, formulation, mechanics, structure, and construct of celestial entities in both planetary and star system. Having studied astronomy as my science in college, I believed myself to have better grasp of heavenly design than most, and yet my knowledge on the interactions of the earth with the other objects of our supposed solar and universal system is now diffused in such way that I am left in quandary that makes me unable to entertain other focus. Similar to the day after I awoke to the conspiracy of 9/11 and government-sponsored terror, I am now in need of model which will sufficiently replace in explanation my observation and imagination of how things daily unfold around me as world. Like my cats when I move them to new residence, having disrupted all they knew as house and living space since their entrance into world as kittens, I too am now exploring new boundary and limitation in hopes of bringing sense to the conundrum determining specificity of location when it comes to envisioning self in world. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed. I have as co-host with me this evening, Cathy Dunson. Cathy, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everybody.
Well, welcome, sister. Always a pleasure to fellowship with you, and thanks for always helping me to keep a pulse on what's going on in the world. I think I would be like really in a bubble without your constant updates and reflections on, what's important and just your ability to rake it all together. And it's amazing, and I appreciate your research, and I know that the listening audience does as well. And so with that, let's go ahead and get into some of the current events or news stories that you find beneficial and important to share with the world.
Well, I pulled some together, and they're just real recent, hot off the press. But before we did, I wanted to mention a particular video that came out that's supportive of your work in Lucifer, Father of Cain. There's a channel we follow. It's called Enter the Stars. His name is Casey, and his video is Twins from Different Fathers. Can you say superfecundation? Did I say that right?
Right, yeah. The heteropaternal superfecundation, yep.
Yes, and there's been some discussion. You've been on a show recently with Now You See TV, which was a really great interview. You touched a lot of hot topics there, talking about your book, and then with what Jonathan Kleck has come out with recently, his revelation having to do with the absolutely having to do with the Vatican, and so much there that is built upon his work for years. And your work as well, and Dr. Joy, you all have researched this information deeply. I don't think anyone in the plane could come close. It's all sourced and researched, and I think very highly of it. I mean, it's really spoken to me. It's answered so many questions, and I recommend that interview you did. It might be an opportunity to take pause and think, well, I'm kind of coming at this topic the way Globe Earth, the scientism group has been coming at those who are investigating flat Earth. Because I've seen it. It's exactly the same thing without realizing, stepping back and thinking, oh my gosh, these people have been studying this for years. Right. And they're confirming witnesses. And it's an area of topic that, these other people have not looked into. Exactly. And I think it's just a matter of, realizing, okay, either agree to disagree, but, like we would want others in the flat earth or in other areas where you don't know fully, to love one another as brothers and sisters in Christ.
Exactly.
That should be our first focus. And you actually, there's a quote of yours that I had written down long ago. I mean, it's very simple that, what is our goal in life? It's salvation through Christ and eternal life. And I don't even know if you even remember that you wrote that, but that was something that I wrote down. It's short, and that is my goal in life, salvation through Christ and eternal life. And I want to focus on the words of Jesus, which were about loving one another. In John 13:34, he said, "A new commandment I give to you, that if you love one another just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another." And I think that it applies in what we were just talking about. It applies. I see this happen a lot. People find fault in things coming from Hillsong. And I love their music. Mm-hmm. Their music, it glorifies God. You cannot deny that. Yes. But to attack them, I mean, to me, the church down the street, the mega church I used to belong to and volunteer, and I was there every weekend. I did everything with them. They are as blind as Hillsong. Are these people going to go and start, talking about all of these other congregations? I don't think we need to talk about them. I think we need to love them. I think
putting together, even like with the story of the One World Trade Center and the Twin Towers previous, and now all of these things that he's tying together as far as the Locust Army and our being having fell into this world, that we were once immortal, bright-natured beings, and that the whole collective fall of humanity has to do with incarnating in the flesh now, and that we are in a fallen form in a fallen world, and that we pre-existed, and so his discernment is similar to mine in that regard, and he has been brought to understanding from a completely different perspective and point of view, whereas my study and my understanding and revelation on all of this was led by the study of all these scriptures, all these other books that most people ignore, never read, and probably never even had heard of. And so just in reading and studying all that material, so much that is not embraced as mainstream truth kept presenting itself to me, and so the Most High led me in that regard to those revelations, which I have shared in my radio and work, and as well as in the many books that I've written. And so it's a blessing. It's a huge blessing to have individuals, even like yourself and the others that, share fellowship with us through the different radio programs in the chat room, in the commentary on our videos, the supportive, especially those that are, supportive of, and that in sharing their own testimony are confirming witness to the revelations that all of us share, because we do get attacked at every turn of the way. It's unbelievable how much
only compared to the flat Earth.
Right, yeah.
And you went right into that. I would think, especially with some of the things I've seen coming from people who have been investigating flat Earth as well, there